LSU has fired offensive coordinator Joe Sloan. We'll take a look at what the staff shakeup means for the rest of the season for the Tigers. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. And in times like these, I'm going to guess that's not a problem. So we thank you sincerely for that. Brian Kelly fired on Sunday, and it was widely assumed that more changes would be coming. And that did, in fact, happen officially on Monday morning as LSU issued the press release that offensive coordinator Joe Sloan also fired. And there was a subsequent staff shakeup that I want to get into. Alex Atkins will take over play calling duties, but that's only part of the staff shakeup and why it's significant for the remainder of the season. So we'll get to that in a second. I do want to take a quick moment, though, and talk about Joe Sloan, because as I mentioned with Brian Kelly, sometimes it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it obviously didn't end well for Brian Kelly with so much expectation on this season to be sitting there at 5-3, 2-3 in conference play, all of your big picture goals of the season gone. It's hard to look back and think of the good. And there was certainly good during Brian Kelly's tenure. They won the West in year one, and obviously Jaden Daniels won the program's third Heisman Trophy. And there were impressive wins a season ago against Ole Miss and Baton Rouge was a moment none of us will ever soon forget. The Clemson game this year was incredible. It's disappointing the season has gone the way it has, but there were good moments that I think are important to recognize. And so, too, is it true with Joe Sloan that I think people are going to remember the immediacy and how it's ended this year with the LSU offense being objectively very bad. There was no way around that part of the conversation. There was no explaining the offense for being what it is. You're presently 49th in passing offense nationally. You're 124th in rushing offense, 124 out of 136. You're 82nd in scoring offense. You're a bad offense. And Joe Sloan's the offensive coordinator. And when you have responsibility and expectation, you're going to get the lion's share of the blame. And so Joe Sloan is going to eat a lion's share of the blame. It's why he's no longer LSU's offensive coordinator today. But I do think it's important to note that Sloan did a lot of good during his time in Baton Rouge. And one of the reasons why I, throughout the bulk of the season, was willing to be patient with the offense was because we saw the combination of Nussmeier and Sloan have success the year prior. LSU was top 10 in the country in passing offense. LSU was top 30 in the country in scoring offense a year ago. They were top 30 in the country in total offense. So you're talking about, they were over 30 points a game, and they were top 30 in total offense. So you saw that combination work. And it's fair to ask, well, what went wrong this year? And I know so much of the blame has gone to Sloan and Nussmeier. And my contention has been everyone deserves some share of blame. Did Garrett's injury slow things? Probably. Did Joe Sloan have trouble with play call and circumstance? Sure, he deserves game planning. I mean, I told you my biggest complaint was the Ole Miss game. How in the world you could be so imbalanced run past where you only run the ball on consecutive plays twice the entire game? I'm with you. There are a lot of those moments. But then there's moments that we tend to forget, like, in the loss against Vanderbilt, where you had a procedure penalty at the goal line. The play that was drawn up was perfect. It was a walk-in touchdown for Xavier Thomas, but it got negated. You end up settling for a field goal. We forget the play call that worked. So, listen, I'm not here to litigate the 2025 offense. They are what they are, and it's been a lot wrong. The offensive line's been atrocious. Nussmeier's been hurt, and then at times inaccurate. Sloan's play calling, game plan, it all deserves blame. All of it. Brad Davis is the offensive line coach. Everyone, when you're that bad, with the amount of talent you have, everybody shoulders some degree of the blame. And Joe Sloan deserves the lion's share of it, absolutely. But he's also a guy that came here from Louisiana Tech in Brian Kelly's first season and worked hand in hand with offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock, who was the play caller. And Denbrock did an incredible job and has continued to do an amazing job at Notre Dame. But Sloan was the quarterback's coach. Denbrock worked with the tight ends. And that meant Sloan was working with Jaden Daniels. And if you remember when Jaden Daniels came to LSU, the big knock on Jaden, I remember having his mom Regina on my radio show whenever when Jaden transferred in. And we had that conversation that the big knock on Jaden was his accuracy coming in from Arizona State. His accuracy and sometimes inability to hit the deep ball. You can smile and laugh at it now because Jaden left LSU as one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the history of the program and in college football. And he's continued that on in his NFL career. Well, Joe Sloan deserves a ton of credit for that. I can remember going to fall camp that first year in 2022. And the amount of accuracy drills that we watched the quarterbacks run with Joe Sloan at the helm, where they would put a basket elevated in the back corner of the end zone. It was just drilling, dropping the ball in a bucket, so to speak, in the back corner. There were target drills where they had to hit the upright or the crossbar on the goalpost. It was just so much focus on from 5 yards out, from the right hash throwing left hash throwing right, on the move. And that accuracy that Jaden established, I think Joe Sloan deserves a tremendous amount of credit for Jaden's development. Now, a lot of Jaden's incredible was Jaden's God-given ability, his nuance, his improvisational skills, ability to run, absolutely. But it would also, just like it would be disingenuous, remove blame from Joe Sloan for what's gone wrong in 2025. It would be disingenuous not to give him some degree of credit for Jaden Daniels' development. And of course, you had one of the greatest offensive seasons in college football history and Jaden winning a Heisman. And Joe Sloan was a big part of that and deserves credit to a degree for how that season unfolded as well. I don't know what will be next for Joe Sloan. He's still a young coach who's got a tremendous amount of experience now, and a guy that wants to be a head coach, and certainly was, when you're an OC at a place like LSU, success in that job gives you the opportunity to take that stair step. But that obviously won't happen now. Sloan's next job likely will be a position coach at another major school, or maybe a coordinator at a lower level, a G6 type school. We'll see how that all may play out. But Joe Sloan fired. Now, the other part of the conversation was, and I know I want to be clear, especially if you caught my episode with Brian Kelly being fired. I'm going to try to be very clear when I'm reporting and when I'm speculating, when I'm giving you my opinion and when I'm telling you factually what I know. And what I can tell you is that there were conversations about moving on from other staff members. I know there was a tremendous amount of line coach Brad Davis and special teams coordinator Amon Anon. That isn't really a surprise because those areas struggled. Brian Kelly was visibly upset with a lot of those coaches on the sideline, and so you saw a lot of that manifest here in these decisions. What a decision has been made, however, is that only Joe Sloan is being fired. The rest of the staff is remaining in place. There is, however, and has been a shuffle of responsibilities, and I want to talk about that as we continue here, Locked on LSU, your team every day. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Pull up the Game Time app, just a couple of taps. You see amazing deals. Talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. And it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way to buy tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. And we're brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Joe Sloan is out, and the conversation now centers around what other staff moves are taking place. And what I will tell you is conversations that I had on Sunday revolved around who would end up calling plays. And there were two people that were considered, and um, there was a degree of support for Tim Rattay. Now, remember, Tim Rattay is a former Louisiana Tech quarterback, played in the NFL, joined LSU staff this year as an offensive analyst, helping Joe Sloan with the quarterbacks. And Rattay has not been a play caller before in his career, but there was some support for Tim Rattay to be the play caller. Alex Atkins was the other option. Now, remember, Alex Atkins came on this year as the tight ends coach, but previously Atkins had served as the offensive coordinator at Florida State from 2020 to 2024. He was offensive line coach from 2020 and 2021, was elevated to OC in 22, where he served in that role for 3 seasons, 22, 23, and 24. So Atkins was the coordinator at Florida State in that terrific 2023 season where they had the undefeated regular season that ended, unfortunately, with Jordan Travis's injury. And then in 2024, they went 2-10, and he was scapegoated for that awful season and then was fired. But Atkins shared play calling duties with Mike Norvell, and he also called plays at Charlotte as their offensive coordinator in 2019. Atkins has also been a high-level assistant when he was at Tulane from 2016 to 2018, even serving as assistant head coach, and he also served as run game coordinator there as well. So Atkins has a lot of experience. And by the way, what I was told is that Frank Wilson ultimately was allowed to make that determination on how the staff would shuffle. Frank Wilson, as the interim head coach, is the one who made the determination of who would fill what roles. So Alex Atkins is going to remain the tight ends coach, but will also serve now as the primary play caller for LSU for the remaining 4 games. I will be fascinated to see if Atkins, whose background is as an offensive lineman, an offensive line coach, and a run game coordinator, might focus more on the running game. Now, remember, I know we don't want to talk about the Texas A&M game, but one of the things leading into that game that I was told throughout the week, and of course we shared with you that Harlem Berry would get his first start as an LSU Tiger in that game, is that they decided to operate more of a between the tackles run scheme in the week leading up. And then Harlem Berry was crushing it during the week, and so they were giving him the start. So I can't help but wonder if, with now Alex Atkins at the helm, a guy whose background is offensive line and running game, over the remaining 4 games, we don't see more of a commitment to running the football, especially when you're talking about an offensive line that has struggled so mightily in the pass protection part of the game. So is this a scenario where maybe we see a more of an emphasis on the run with Alex Atkins as the play caller? That's one thing to consider. I mentioned Tim Rattay. So Tim Rattay, I'm told, will take on a larger role in game. He will be the quarterback's coach, replacing Sloan in that respect. So Rattay will coach the quarterbacks, but he will also have an increased role in game planning and on game days as well. Whereas obviously Joe Sloan was in the booth calling plays. And Atkins was right next to Joe Sloan, for what it's worth. If you ever caught those shots, the TV camera shots in the booth during the game of Sloan, Atkins was right next to Sloan. So Rattay will take on an increased role on game day, I'm told, but will work throughout the week with the quarterback's coach. There's been a lot of questions about Cortez Hankton. So Cortez Hankton had the co-OC role with Joe Sloan this year, but Hankton has never been a play caller. He will maintain his current role working with the receivers. And then the other interesting note, remember, Frank Wilson was the running backs coach, associate head coach, running backs coach. Well, now that Frank is the head coach, the interim head coach, he is going to take on so many more duties, including head coaching duties on game day. So someone needed to step up and help with the running backs. Well, that would be Corday Hankton. So Corday Hankton is Cortez Hankton's brother, who joined the staff back in March of 2024. So he's here. So this is his second season now with LSU. He works as an offensive analyst. He is the younger brother of Cortez Hankton. Prior to LSU, he was on staff as an offensive analyst at UVA at Virginia, and before that was the running backs coach at Charlotte. So he's been around. He was a senior offensive analyst at Texas. He was a GA at Michigan State and Colorado. He was a defensive grad assistant at Michigan State. So he's been around. He played safety at Jackson State. Was a high school coach before. Coach of John Ehret, New Orleans, before jumping into the college ranks as an assistant, as he's now continued to elevate. But with Frank Wilson, so Corday Hankton had been serving as a running back coach assistant alongside Frank Wilson. Corday Hankton will now take over the role of running backs coach, primarily working with the running backs on game day, while Frank Wilson is now the acting and interim head coach. So something that is a bit of a shakeup. I will be interested to see. Frank Wilson was always the guy that was responsible for determining and deciding what running back went in the game on what series. Joe Sloan was calling the plays, but whatever, Frank would determine what running back was in. Cortez would determine what receivers go in and what sets, and then Joe Sloan would just call the plays. Brian Kelly often said that he had, veto authority, where he could say, I want this player at this moment, or I want this play. We want to run the ball here. But Frank had that autonomy. It'll be interesting to see if Corday Hankton has that autonomy now, or if that will still fall on Frank. Will Corday be the one who says, all right, Harlem, you're in this series, or Caden Durham, you're in this series, however that may go. But those are the staff updates worth knowing. A lot of people asked about Brad Davis. Brad Davis is not being let go. He is still employed as LSU's offensive line coach. So what you need to know, Joe Sloan out, Alex Atkins remains tight ends coach and is now the primary play caller. Tim Rattay, increased role within the offense and will coach quarterbacks. Cortez Hankton maintains his current role, and then Corday Hankton will take on an increased role with the running backs while Frank Wilson manages head coaching responsibilities. Anything else that may change, of course, we'll talk about it here. But the Tigers have a great opportunity. The line, as LSU a week from Saturday goes to Alabama, I'm looking at here, opened at Alabama as a touchdown favorite. And LSU, many people assuming an interim bump, the line got bet down already to 5.5. So Tigers will have an opportunity to go on the road, maybe get an interim bump, play really well, and see if they can steal a game against Alabama. But what I think is the most important thing is, up until this point as we record this, there hasn't been any attrition. Remember, you have the option whenever a coach leaves, players have the option to enter the transfer portal. So, and a transfer without penalty. So, and as of now, we have not heard of any players leaving the program. One of the key components in the decision to promote Frank Wilson was obviously he was the associate coach. He's got head coaching experience, being at UTSA and at McNeese, but he's also a guy that these players love. And the hope is that he can win the locker room, get these guys to play hard for the remaining 4 games, and see what may happen. You're going to be favored at home against Arkansas and against Western Kentucky. And maybe you could find a way to steal one or both of those road games against Alabama and Oklahoma. It's something I don't think we would have thought was even remotely possible a week ago. But now you look and say, this is a really talented team. What may happen? The other factor, maybe I'm bearing the lead a little bit here, that I think is very much worth discussing, is if the coaching staff makes a change at quarterback. I know Garrett Nussmeier is a 5th-year senior. He's given his all to the program, and I have said, and I will maintain, I do not believe Garrett Nussmeier is the biggest problem with this team. He's played hurt. The offensive line has been awful, all the things. But I do and have heard that there has been disagreement internally with the staff about which quarterback to play. That there are some, this is prior, there's some staff members that want to play Michael Van Buren. Do we see LSU make that change? Now, that is an unenviable ask for Van Buren to say, okay, now you're going to get your first start and you're going to go on the road and play at Alabama. I don't know that that's what they will do, but it's something that you might consider as they move throughout this week with the open date and then head toward the game in Tuscaloosa a week from Saturday, which we did find out will be prime time of course, in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night when LSU's back on the practice field after their open date. Any of those updates, we'll let you know. Frank Wilson is expected to meet with the media at some time this week. I was told that press conference was supposed to be at noon on Monday. That did not happen as Frank Wilson held staff meetings on Monday. The LSU team gets back together for team activities on Tuesday for the first time under Frank Wilson. And then at some point, I'm sure there will be media availability this week where we'll have an opportunity to talk to Coach Frank about this transition and what to expect here over the final 4 weeks. And of course, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked On LSU. Hey, thanks so much for being here with us. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. We're also available on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single day, along with Locked On Saints, Locked On Pelicans, and Locked On SEC. So check your listings and check us out there on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network as well. And thank you for being here, Locked On LSU, your team every day.